Imagine you are a seventh grader. Your teacher doesn't hand you a standard math worksheet or a multiple choice quiz.
Right, that would be way too easy.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, they give you a scenario. A local food supply is collapsing, the state biologists are panicking, and the local community is just, well, they're really worried about surviving the winter.
And your assignment is to figure out how to fix it.
Right. So, welcome to the deep dive. We are taking a look at a really fascinating stack of sources today. It ranges from, educational frameworks to cultural standards straight from Alaska.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a very specific guideline. It's called Alaska Cultural Standard C2.
Which sounds very official.
It does sound official, but it's actually this profound standard designed for students. It simply states that culturally knowledgeable students make constructive contributions to the governance of their community and the well-being of their family.
See, when you hear the word governance, you probably just picture ballot boxes or, I don't know, politicians in suits.
Or a really dense civics textbook, right?
Yeah, exactly. But we aren't talking about telling kids to just go vote when they turn 18. We are looking at how communities actually make shared decisions.
Right. How they distribute work, resolve conflicts, and care for one another on a daily basis.
Because if you limit governance to just what happens in government buildings, you kind of miss out on the actual mechanisms of how human communities survive.
You miss the whole picture. To understand how a seventh grader can constructively contribute to the governance of their community, we first have to understand what governance actually looks like on the ground in Alaska.
And it is vastly different from the top-down bureaucratic model most of us are used to.
Oh, completely different.
So paint that picture for us. I mean, if it is not a mayor sitting behind a desk handing down laws, what is it?
Well, in this context, governance is deeply rooted in something called relational systems thinking.
Okay, relational systems thinking.
Yeah. It's this interconnected web of shared decision-making and resource management. It operates on the principle that everything in nature and human society is dynamic and non-static and completely connected.
So we see this play out clearly in real-world co-management groups.
We do. What's fascinating here is looking at groups like the Alaska Beluga Whale Committee or the ABWC. It's a prime example of this.
I was actually looking at their work in the sources. This is not a situation where outside scientists show up with clipboards and just tell local communities how to manage their resources.
Not at all. It operates as a genuine partnership. You have indigenous hunters and Western scientists collaborating directly on the research.
Wow, so they're working side by side.
Exactly. The hunters are out there on the ice and the water every single day. They are generating hypotheses based on generations of traditional ecological knowledge.
Because they know the historical migration patterns.
Right. They notice minute changes in the sea ice, and they are the ones actually collecting the physical biological samples.
And then the scientists come in to provide technical tools for data interpretation, right? Like genetic sequencing or satellite tracking.
Precisely. Both groups hold a critical piece of the puzzle. The hunters have that longitudinal, generational data, and the scientists have the micro-level biological data.
So they sit at the same table.
Yeah, they sit at the same table and govern the resource together. They determine safe harvest quotas through shared authority.
Reading through these educational frameworks, I came across an analogy that really helped me visualize this interconnectedness.
Oh, the agricultural one.
Yeah, the Three Sisters agricultural model. For anyone who hasn't heard of it, it is an indigenous farming practice where you plant corn, beans, and squash together because they biologically support one another.
It is a brilliant way to visualize it.
I mean, the corn grows tall and provides a physical structure. The beans pull nitrogen from the air and fix it into the soil as fertilizer.
And then the squash spreads its massive leaves across the ground.
Exactly, which blocks weeds and traps moisture in the soil. It's an entire biological feedback loop where every part supports the other.
So if we apply that farming practice directly to the Alaskan governance model, the traditional ecological knowledge acts as the corn.
Okay, it provides the deep historical root system.
Yes, the structural backbone of the community. Then Western science acts as the beans, climbing that structure and fixing specific nutrients.
Or in this case, specific quantitative data.
Right, into the environment. And the youth and elders act as the squash, protecting the ground and ensuring the system retains its life-giving moisture.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, you cannot just remove the beans and expect the corn to yield a healthy crop. Governance happens anywhere people distribute work and manage resources together, even in your own household or neighborhood.
Okay, let's unpack this. If governance is this complex relational system where science, culture, and community are just inextricably linked, how do we teach that to young people?
It seems incredibly difficult, right?
Yeah, I mean, taking the theory of co-management and putting it into a middle school classroom sounds nearly impossible.
Well, the educational frameworks we're looking at handle this by abandoning textbooks in favor of high-stakes role-play simulations.
They tackle real contemporary issues.
They do. A prime example used in Alaskan 7th grade life science classes is the Western Alaska Salmon Run simulation.
And this scenario is where things get really intense. A teacher tells a classroom of 12 and 13-year-olds that there has been a massive simulated decline in a local salmon run.
Which is not some abstract hypothetical. In rural Alaska, a salmon collapse threatens the primary food security and the economic survival of the entire community.
The brilliance of the simulation is that students are not asked to solve it in a vacuum.
No, they are assigned specific, often conflicting roles. Some students represent tribal elders, drawing on historical memory and cultural values regarding respect for the animal.
Okay.
Others play subsistence fishers who literally need the salmon to feed their families through the harsh winter.
And then you have students representing the commercial fishing industry.
Right, who are terrified about losing their livelihoods and bankrupting the local economy. And then, of course, you have the state biologists from the Department of Fish and Game.
And each of these groups is working with completely different sets of data.
They are. They have to synthesize quantitative data, such as historical weir counts.
Wait, that's a physical fence, right?
Yeah, it's placed across a river to manually count the fish swimming upstream to spawn. They look at that data alongside sea surface temperature anomalies.
But the simulation requires them to weigh that Western scientific data equally against traditional ecological knowledge.
Exactly, like oral histories of past climate shifts or local observations of changing predator behaviors.
I am having trouble seeing how middle schoolers actually solve a problem where state priorities fundamentally clash with local subsistence needs.
It's a huge challenge.
I mean, if a state biologist says we have to shut down all fishing to save the run, but the subsistence fisher says, if I don't fish, my family starves this winter, a compromise feels impossible. How do they move past a stalemate?
Well, that tension is the entire point of the exercise. This teaches students that science and governance are socially vetted. If they just take a majority vote, a minority group loses everything.
Which in this scenario means losing their food or their homes.
Right. So they have to learn how consensus building actually works in practice. They learn different decision-making methods, ultimately aiming to draft a consensus-based resource management plan. They shift away from rigid positions and focus on shared interests.
How does that actually look in the classroom, though?
A student playing the biologist might realize their core interest is simply ensuring enough salmon reach the spawning grounds to guarantee future generations of fish.
Okay.
The student playing the subsistence fisher realizes their core interest is securing enough protein for their family's immediate survival.
So they have to find the overlap.
Exactly. Through consensus, they might draft a plan that restricts commercial fishing temporarily, creates specific shortened windows for subsistence fishing, and sets up community sharing networks.
So that if one family catches enough, they distribute the surplus.
Yes, they find a solution everyone can tolerate, even if it is not their ideal outcome.
The sources also mention that these students have to navigate heavy, real-world legal frameworks while they do this. There are references to Title VIII of Anelsia and the Katie John cases.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to clarify what those are because they sound like massive hurdles for a 7th grader to understand.
They're foundational to Alaskan governance. ANLC stands for the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act.
Okay, got it.
Title VIII of that federal law specifically mandates a priority for rural Alaskan residents to hunt and fish for subsistence on federal public lands.
That makes sense.
But here is the catch. The state of Alaska's constitution does not allow for a rural preference. It says all residents must have equal access to fish and game.
Wait, so you have federal law and state law in direct contradiction.
Exactly. And that contradiction led to the Katie John cases. Katie John was an Adna Athabaskan elder who was told by the state that she could no longer fish at her family's traditional fish camp, a place her people had used for generations.
Oh, wow. So what happened?
She sued, arguing that federal law protected her right to subsistence fish in navigable waters. The resulting legal battles lasted for decades and fundamentally shaped who has jurisdiction over Alaskan waters.
So when students do this simulation, they are not just arguing over fish, they are navigating real legal history.
Right. They are learning to ask what I like to call the 4 foundational questions of governance.
What are those 4 questions?
Who decides?
Yeah.
Whose knowledge counts? Who does the work? And who experiences the results?
Those are heavy questions.
They are. By wrestling with them, students begin to see how scientific evidence, cultural knowledge, legal constraints, and pure human ethics constantly interact in community decisions.
The simulation clearly prepares them for the complexity of the adult world, but Cultural Standards C2 specifically requires students to make actual constructive contributions to their community and to the well-being of their family right now.
Right. It is not just about pretending to govern in a classroom.
So how are youth stepping up and doing that before they even graduate?
The sources highlight several incredible programs where youth are doing highly consequential work. A great example is the clam camps and herring camps run by organizations like the Sitka Tribe of Alaska.
I found the mechanics of the clam camps fascinating. Students are out on the beaches harvesting clams, but then they are using microscopes to identify specific toxic algae species.
Yes, the ones responsible for paralytic shellfish poisoning, or PSP.
PSP is a severe neurotoxin, right?
It is. You cannot cook it out of the shellfish, you cannot freeze it out, and you cannot see it with the naked eye.
That's terrifying.
It really is. If a community unknowingly harvests and eats clams during a toxic algae bloom, it can be deadly. They are combining traditional ecological knowledge about where to harvest with Western scientific techniques.
Wait, I am stuck on something here. If these kids are out collecting data on toxic algae, aren't they basically just acting as unpaid interns for the state?
I can see why you'd ask that.
I mean, how is a student doing free data collection for a government agency an example of local governance?
That is a very valid critique, but the sources draw a crucial distinction between mere unpaid labor and genuine community contribution.
Okay, what's the distinction?
It comes down to reciprocity. These students are not generating data to just be filed away in some nameless bureaucratic database. By monitoring for PSP, they are directly ensuring the safety of their own family's dinner tables.
Oh, I see. The primary beneficiary isn't the state, it is their own neighborhood.
Exactly. It exemplifies what the sources call the One Health paradigm.
One Health. What is that?
This is the understanding that human health is inextricably linked to the health of the animals in the environment they share. By testing those clams, a 7th grader is actively managing a local resource and protecting their elders.
That's incredible.
Furthermore, you see students participating in the Alaska Youth Stewards Program. These young people are out doing the heavy physical labor of repairing trails and restoring salmon-spawning habitats that were degraded by historical logging.
So they are literally acting as caretakers of the land. But Standard C2 defines family well-being and constructive contribution really broadly, right?
It does, yeah.
It is not just about the highly visible labor like restoring a stream or running a microscope. It includes the invisible labor that actually holds a family together.
The distinction between visible and invisible labor is vital here. Constructive contributions also include everyday, quiet acts of caregiving and respect.
Like what kind of acts?
It might be a student donating part of their first successful hunt to a local senior center. Or it might be doing physical chores for an elder whose mobility is declining, hauling water or chopping firewood.
The sources also point out that simply actively listening and asking informed questions when an elder shares an oral history is considered a major contribution.
Yeah, absolutely.
That surprised me at first. I mean, listening doesn't really sound like work.
It might not look like physical work, but when a young person sits and listens to an elder, they are absorbing critical data about the environment, past crises, and social ties.
They become the memory drive for the community.
Exactly. Taking on the responsibility of carrying that knowledge forward is a vital epistemic bridge between generations. Without that invisible labor of listening and learning, the community's cultural survival just breaks down.
It's the difference between genuinely useful help and performative help. You aren't doing it to put it on a college resume. You are doing it because you are a community member, and that is your obligation. So all this preparation, the consensus simulations in the classroom, the biological monitoring at the clam camps, the quiet chores for the elders, it all points toward a singular goal when a community faces an existential threat.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What happens when that entire system of governance and community well-being is pushed to the absolute brink?
Well, you see the ultimate test of a community's resilience, which usually comes in the form of a sudden environmental disaster.
The sources detail the devastating impact of ex-Typhoon Merbok, which slammed into western Alaska in September of 2022. We are talking about massive, historic storm surges.
Oh, they were catastrophic. Coastal villages were completely flooded.
Subsistence camps that families rely on to smoke and store their winter food were just washed away.
The storm was so powerful it actually picked up heavy fishing boats and scattered them miles inland across the tundra.
To completely displace them.
Yeah. Saltwater intrusion compromised drinking wells. Families lost the gear they needed to survive the coming winter.
That's devastating.
It is. And this event puts the true purpose of community governance into stark relief. The goal of governance is not to hold meetings or pass rules. The goal is resilience and stability in the face of chaos.
Because the recovery from Merbach wasn't just about residents sitting around waiting for federal aid or formal government intervention.
No, it was immediate ground-level action. We saw rapid, coordinated local response networks spring into action. The residents pooled their resources without needing a committee to tell them how.
They just acted.
Right. Once the winter freeze finally set in and the tundra hardened, neighbors used their own snow machines to go out and retrieve those lost fishing vessels from miles inland.
Wow.
They worked together to repair critical water and sanitation infrastructure so their neighbors wouldn't freeze or succumb to waterborne illnesses.
They just did the work because they knew who was capable of doing what, and they knew the work had to be done.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the social bonds, the shared responsibilities, and the local knowledge cultivated through standards like C2 are exactly what allow human communities to adapt and reestablish stability after catastrophic events.
That makes total sense.
When a storm scatters your boats and destroys your camps, you do not survive because of a ballot box. You survive because you know your neighbors, you understand your environment, and you have practiced how to work together under pressure.
So to fulfill Alaska Cultural Standards C2, a student is not expected to put the weight of the world on their shoulders. A 7th grader is not expected to fix an entire community's economy by themselves.
Or single-handedly solve a global climate crisis.
Right. Governance is inherently local, and family well-being is built on a web of shared, interconnected responsibilities.
It goes right back to the Three Sisters agricultural model. You do not have to be the entire farm.
Yep.
You just have to be the beans or the squash.
One thoughtful, reliable contribution, whether that is looking through a microscope to monitor a clam bed for toxins, or finding a compromise and a tough consensus discussion about salmon, or simply doing the invisible labor of helping an elder chop wood, that is what actually holds the community together.
It completely reframes how we view responsibility. I would like to leave you with the final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent this time looking deeply at this Alaskan model of relational systems thinking, where governance is something that happens at the kitchen table and on the riverbank. What happens if you apply that exact same lens to your own life?
That's a great question.
Take a look around your own neighborhood. Who are the unrecognized culture bearers right outside your front door? The people who remember the history of your street, who know how the local water flows, who check in on the vulnerable neighbors during a power outage.
Yeah, the people doing the invisible labor.
Exactly. If we took Standard C2 and redefined community governance in our own lives to include those quiet, everyday acts of caregiving, knowledge sharing, and environmental stewardship, how might that completely change the way you value the people you interact with every single day?
From ballot boxes to just taking care of each other, that is a massive shift. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.